The 13th constellation was never meant to vanish so quietly, erased not by the turning of the heavens, but by human hands. Imagine looking up at the night sky, believing the map of your soul was complete, only to discover that an entire gate had been sealed shut. What truths were hidden behind that silence?
Welcome to Tales of Mythology, where ancient legends, forgotten horrors, and supernatural wars come to life. If you love exploring the untold side of mythology, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tap the bell below, so you never miss another legendary story.
Long before 12 neat signs circled the human imagination, the ancients traced the path of the sun across the ecliptic with painstaking reverence. Babylonian scribes and Egyptian priests didn't stop at 12. They saw 13. Among them was a figure entwined with a serpent, a healer who stood between death and rebirth. His name, Ophiuchus. He embodied transformation itself, and for that very reason, he was both feared and...
Are you looking for the most affordable way to add electric cooling and heating to your older home? If that's the case, then you're going to want to take a look at this new system that we just finished unboxing called a ductless mini split.
and revered. To the ancients, the presence of this sign was no anomaly. It aligned perfectly with the cycles of the moon, with the rhythm of blood, tide, and breath. The erasure of this sign was not a mistake. It was the first act of cosmic censorship. As historian Michael Bajent once noted, suppressing a symbol is not about truth, it is about control. The 13th constellation was not merely a set of stars. It was a story etched into the heavens, a living archetype of the shaman, the healer, the one who carried the serpent of wisdom in his grasp. This was not a harmless snake. It was Kundalini itself, the coiled force said to awaken at the base of the spine, igniting power and transformation as it rose. To those who looked at the sky as scripture, Ophiuchus was not just another sign in the Zodiac. He was the threshold between light and shadow, between mortality and transcendence. The serpent he held was both poison and cure, shadow and revelation. His presence whispered that life was not linear but cyclical, bound in eternal death and rebirth. Carl Jung once reflected, "The snake is an image of the transforming unconscious, the force that devours but also redeems." Why then was he erased? The answer is not in the stars, but in empires. 12 is the number of control. 12 months in a year, 12 apostles, 12 tribes, 12 signs, a perfect order that eliminates chaos. The Romans, hungry for structure and dominion, embraced 12 as the architecture of time and faith. The 13th stood for what could not be ordered: change, rebellion, the terrifying promise of transformation. In erasing Ophiuchus, they tamed the Zodiac, turning a living, breathing cosmos into a wheel that could be counted, named, and controlled. The serpent bearer was too dangerous, too uncontainable, and so he was cast into the shadows. As scholar David Fidela reminds us, the shift from sacred chaos to rigid order was never accidental. It was a declaration of power. And yet, even in silence, the serpent never stopped coiling. Ophiuchus remained in the night sky, his stars unblinking, his story preserved in whispers, in secret traditions, in the forgotten edges of mythology. The ancients understood that to suppress a symbol was to wound the soul itself, and so knowledge survived in fragments, in hermeticism, in alchemy, in the coiled staff of Asclepius that still represents medicine today. The erasure of the 13th sign was more than the loss of a constellation. It was the mutilation of humanity's own map of healing, leaving us fractured, incomplete, forever searching for what was cut away. As Joseph Campbell declared, myth is the secret opening through which the inexhaustible energies of the cosmos pour into human cultural manifestation. Without Ophiuchus, the Zodiac became a closed circuit, neat but suffocating, polished but sterile. The serpent-bearer's disappearance marks the moment when astrology ceased to be an initiation and became an institution. His absence is our amnesia. To reclaim him is not to add a star sign to a list, but to unlock a forgotten gate of the soul itself. And that is why the 13th sign is rising again, forcing us to confront what we have denied for centuries. There is a serpent coiled inside every myth, sleeping in the shadow of every human heart. The only question is whether we fear its venom or dare to drink its medicine.
Come on, we have places to go.
And kingdoms to see!
Kingdoms to see! What's up?
The disappearance of the serpent-bearer from the recognized Zodiac was not a matter of oversight or accidental omission. It was a deliberate act shaped by the forces of history, politics, and religion, each weaving together to create an illusion of order at the expense of truth. The ancients had once acknowledged the full map of the heavens, a cycle of 13 that resonated with the natural rhythms of lunar time and spiritual initiation. Yet when empires began to consolidate power, they preferred symmetry, rigidity, and predictability. 12 became the sacred number of control. 12 months, 12 tribes, 12 apostles, 12 signs. And so the 13th, unruly and defiant, had to be erased. It symbolized chaos, healing, transformation, and the uncontainable mysteries of life and death. Such forces could not be easily domesticated, and those who held authority chose instead to suppress them. As the historian Mircea Eliade remarked, every suppression of the sacred carries within it the fear of liberation. The serpent-bearer, linked with serpentine symbolism, was especially threatening in a world where religion sought to demonize the snake as a symbol of sin and temptation. Within early Christianity, serpents became shorthand for the devil, the fall, and forbidden knowledge. How could a constellation centered on a man holding a serpent survive such narratives? By aligning astrology with the new doctrines of the empire, the serpent-bearer became a casualty of theological necessity. The 13th sign was dismissed, silenced, or reinterpreted as dangerous heresy. What had once represented healing and renewal was reframed as chaos, darkness, and evil. In this reframing, the serpent-bearer lost his seat in the zodiac wheel. The world inherited a system that looked complete, but was, in truth, missing its most transformative archetype. Carl Jung observed, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The erasure of the serpent-bearer was precisely the opposite. It was an attempt to banish darkness instead of integrating it. Political motives also played a crucial role in this deliberate act of suppression. The Roman Empire thrived on order, and in order to govern diverse peoples, it sought to align every cultural and spiritual framework into a neat, controllable system. Astrology was no exception. The 13th sign, associated with initiation, transformation, and the primal serpent energy, carried a destabilizing message. It invited individuals to rebel against imposed boundaries, to embrace cycles of death and rebirth, and to uncover hidden knowledge. Such ideas threatened the stability of empire and church alike. The preference for 12 signs was not simply practical, it was ideological. By offering a closed and structured zodiac, those in power provided a system that reinforced conformity while erasing the symbols of resistance. David Ulansey writes in his study of ancient mysteries, "To reshape the heavens was to reshape reality itself, for the sky was the code by which the earth understood its order." The serpent-bearer's disappearance also reflects a deeper cultural anxiety about transformation and the feminine principle. 13 is a number intimately tied to the cycles of the moon, to fertility, and to rhythms of the body. It was a number of the sacred feminine, flowing, shifting, unpredictable, connected to life and death. in ways that patriarchal systems found unsettling. The suppression of the 13th sign mirrored a broader erasure of feminine wisdom and serpent symbolism throughout antiquity. The serpent, once a symbol of healing and rebirth, was demonized. The cycles of nature were recast as disorderly, and the archetype of the healer who transcended death was branded as threatening. Thus, the absence of the 13th sign is not just an astrological choice, but part of a wider cultural rewriting. Historian Barbara Walker captured this when she wrote, "The snake, once sacred as the embodiment of life's renewal, became the scapegoat of patriarchal fear." Despite this suppression, the serpent-bearer did not vanish entirely. His image survived in the margins, encoded in myths, preserved in esoteric traditions, and hidden in plain sight. The staff of Asclepius, entwined with a serpent, remains the emblem of medicine to this day, a lingering reminder of the archetype erased from the Zodiac. In the secret schools of Hermeticism and Gnosticism, whispers of the 13th gate continued to circulate. These teachings did not forget the serpent's duality as both poison and cure, as both death and rebirth. By erasing the serpent-bearer from public consciousness, empires may have silenced his archetype from popular astrology, but they could not erase him from human memory. He remained dormant, waiting in myth, symbol, and shadow. Philosopher Joseph Campbell once warned, "If you suppress myth, it surfaces in distorted forms. It will not vanish, it will return as neurosis." The serpent-bearer's absence is precisely such a wound, a missing symbol that has left humanity restless and incomplete. The erasure of the serpent-bearer reveals much more than a gap in a star chart. It illustrates how myth and power are inseparable, how the rewriting of the heavens reflects the rewriting of the soul. When the 13th constellation was pushed into obscurity, humanity lost more than a sign. It lost an archetype of initiation, a guide through shadow, a healer for the deepest wounds of the psyche. This loss was no accident, no innocent simplification. It was a calculated suppression of transformation itself. The consequence was a zodiac system that promised order and completeness, yet lacked the very element that could lead to wholeness. This truth casts a long shadow, one that still influences how we understand ourselves today. In the words of the mythographer Jean Cesnec, "The myths we inherit are not neutral. They are the survivors of battles, the victors of cultural war." To erase a sign is to erase a part of the soul. To demonize the serpent is to deny transformation. What was once feared and silenced will always return, for the heavens cannot be rewritten forever. Though the serpent-bearer was erased from the official zodiac, his image endured in the secret corners of knowledge, hidden in places where tradition and memory refused to die. In Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and later mystical philosophies, the figure of the healer carrying the serpent was preserved as an archetype of wisdom and transformation. These teachings whispered that the serpent was never a symbol of evil, but of divine energy, a force capable of awakening what lay dormant within the human soul. The coiled snake represented Kundalini, the sacred fire resting at the base of the spine, waiting to rise and ignite spiritual consciousness. While empires and religions turned the serpent into a demon, esoteric schools kept alive its original meaning, the eternal rhythm of renewal, death, and rebirth. The continuity of this symbol demonstrates that truth, even when suppressed, always finds a way to survive. Philosopher Gershom Scholem once remarked, "The hidden tradition lives not by being proclaimed, but by being transmitted in silence." The staff of Asclepius, entwined with a single serpent, is perhaps the clearest surviving fragment of the serpent-bearer's legacy. Long before modern medicine adopted it as a universal emblem, it was an ancient symbol of healing and regeneration. This staff is a reminder that the archetype of the serpent-bearer was too powerful to vanish completely. It carried the memory of a figure who defied death, not as a conqueror, but as a healer, one who transformed suffering into wisdom. Alchemists in the Middle Ages took inspiration from this figure, seeing in him the very essence of the great work, the union of opposites, the transformation of shadow into light, poison into cure, mortality into transcendence. To them, the serpent-bearer was not a constellation on the margins of the sky, but a living guide to the inner process of alchemy. As Paracelsus wrote, "The art of healing comes from nature itself, not from the physician. The physician must follow nature, with the serpent as his teacher." In secret societies and mystical traditions, the serpent-bearer was preserved not as a sign in the heavens, but as a path of initiation. His energy was understood as the 13th gate, the hidden portal that led beyond the ordinary cycle of existence. While the 12 signs represented the known stages of identity and destiny, the 13th sign was the threshold into the unknown, the place where transformation demanded surrender to both shadow and light. Those who walked this path were guided through trials that mirrored death and rebirth, seeking not comfort, but transcendence. The serpent was their companion, its dual nature forcing the initiate to embrace contradiction, to see that destruction and healing were two sides of the same power. The archetype thus survived in the underground streams of esoteric thought, never entirely extinguished. As the mystic Valentinus once wrote, "Truth is not given to the world in its fullness. It is hidden, revealed only to those who pass through death to find life." The endurance of this archetype across centuries reveals its deep necessity to the human psyche. Suppression could not destroy it, because the serpent-bearer represented something universal: the integration of shadow, the acceptance of paradox, the courage to face transformation. Even when stripped from the visible Zodiac, he reappeared in myths, rituals, and teachings scattered across different lands and traditions. Among Gnostic texts, the serpent was seen as a bringer of knowledge, defying the false god of order to awaken humanity. In alchemy, the serpent symbolized the prima materia, the raw material that, through suffering and refinement, could become gold. In Kabbalah, the ascent of energy through the tree of life echoed the coiled serpent's rising, connecting earth to heaven. All these variations carried fragments of the serpent-bearer's wisdom, as if the archetype itself refused to die. As Carl Jung emphasized, an archetype is like an old riverbed through which the waters of life have flowed for centuries, and it can never be obliterated. What is most striking is that the serpent-bearer's survival was not merely symbolic, but psychological. By being pushed into obscurity, he became the archetype of the shadow itself, the hidden part of the human soul that society refuses to acknowledge. Without him, the Zodiac became a closed circle, yet the serpent-bearer remained alive in the unconscious, manifesting in dreams, myths, and inner struggles. Those who resonate with this forgotten sign often feel out of place within the traditional 12, carrying a sense of alienation or unfinished purpose. They embody the qualities of transformation, healing, and defiance of rigid systems, but without recognition, they are left wandering in search of identity. This hidden resonance reveals how much the human soul requires this archetype, how incomplete we are without it. As mythologist Joseph Campbell observed, myths are clues to the spiritual potentialities of the human life. To erase one is to erase a path of the soul. The serpent-bearer did not die. He was buried, hidden in symbols, preserved in silence, waiting for the moment when the world would again be ready to confront the truth he embodies. To silence an archetype is not to end it, it is only to force it into the shadows, where it grows until it demands to be remembered.
Monday.com's AI blocks are a total game changer.
Excuse me if I find that hard to believe.
You know that llamas are biologically incapable of lying.
The return of the serpent-bearer into modern consciousness is not a coincidence. At a time when humanity is confronted with collective crises, inner fragmentation, and a rising desire for spiritual authenticity, the 13th sign has begun to resurface as a necessary guide. Its re-emergence reflects not just an astronomical curiosity, but a deep psychological and spiritual readiness to reclaim what was denied. The cycles of life and death, the confrontation with shadow, and the healing of trauma are no longer themes hidden in secret schools. They have become central to the modern quest for meaning. People today search beyond the rigidity of traditional systems, seeking wisdom that resonates with the complexity of their inner lives. The serpent bearer embodies that need, for he bridges the gap between suffering and transformation, between despair and renewal. As the philosopher Mircea Eliade noted, when the forgotten returns, it does so not as memory, but as revelation. The awakening of this archetype signals a profound shift in collective psychology. Without the serpent bearer, the Zodiac offered comfort, but no initiation, stability, but no true transformation. With his return, individuals are confronted with the call to face their deepest fears, to step into the darkness of their wounds and emerge renewed. This process is not pleasant, nor is it safe, but it is essential. The serpent bearer's energy forces the soul to confront the inevitability of death, whether literal or symbolic, and discover that renewal lies beyond. In this way, the 13th sign reopens the gate that was closed centuries ago, the path through which one can integrate both shadow and light into wholeness. Carl Jung described this necessity with clarity. There is no birth of consciousness without pain. The serpent bearer reminds us that growth requires descent, that light is only fully known after darkness. The psychological consequences of his absence have been profound, and so his return carries equally profound healing. In a world conditioned to avoid shadow work, the serpent bearer reintroduces the medicine of confrontation. He symbolizes not only healing, but the courage to embrace paradox, to recognize that poison and cure are one and the same. This has direct implications for how individuals understand themselves. Those who resonate with the forgotten sign often feel compelled toward paths of healing, transformation, and deep self-exploration. Their lives carry a sense of intensity, as though they are constantly being called to shed old skins and face new trials. With recognition of the serpent bearer, these experiences are no longer alienation but initiation, no longer punishment but purpose. Joseph Campbell expressed this truth in mythic terms. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. The 13th sign asks us to enter that cave, to meet the serpent, and to emerge whole. The return of the serpent bearer also resonates with the current era of spiritual expansion. Astrology itself has begun to move beyond rigid categories, embracing more fluid and holistic interpretations. As people turn away from systems of control and conformity, they search for symbols that reflect the chaos and depth of their own souls. The serpent bearer, long hidden, is now a fitting guide. His archetype is not one of comfort, but of initiation. He calls humanity to remember that transformation is not optional, that cycles of death and rebirth are the very essence of life. In doing so, he restores a missing piece of the collective soul's map. The 13th sign is not simply an addition to astrology, it is a reminder of the wholeness that was always meant to be. As historian David Fideler explained, to restore a forgotten symbol is to restore a dimension of the psyche, a fragment of the soul's own cosmology. Ultimately, the awakening of the serpent bearer reveals that his erasure was never final. Suppression could bury him, but it could not destroy the truth he carried. His archetype has waited in silence, in myths, in symbols, in the unconscious, until humanity was ready to face what it had long denied. Now, as spiritual awakening spreads and old systems collapse, His return marks the re-entry of transformation into the collective path. The 13th sign offers more than knowledge of stars. It offers the courage to heal, to integrate, and to walk the path of the soul with honesty. To embrace the serpent bearer is to reclaim the lost gate of initiation, to remember that healing and destruction, death and renewal, shadow and light are not enemies, but eternal companions. The serpent waits within each of us, ready to awaken. The serpent's return is not merely an astrological correction, it is the re-emergence of a cosmic truth long denied, the unveiling of a path humanity can no longer ignore. To walk with the serpent bearer is to accept that transformation is our destiny and that the forgotten gate has finally opened. Have you ever wondered why certain books throughout history were hidden, silenced, or even prohibited? Not because they were dangerous weapons, but because their words carried the power to completely change how we perceive reality itself? Imagine this: centuries of knowledge buried beneath veils of secrecy, passed only from master to disciple, as if the world were not ready to awaken.
Welcome to Tales of Mythology, where ancient legends, forgotten horrors, and supernatural wars come to life. If you love exploring the untold side of mythology, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tap the bell below, so you never miss another legendary story.
The Kybalion is no ordinary text. It is cloaked in mystery and whispered about as one of the most